Well, they're not exempt unless they're engaged in bona fide forestry work. Catherine has brought some cases down here challenging these sorts of activities that have been in blatant violation of the protective requirements of the Clean Water Act, where the federal regulators have allowed the activity to occur, and has gotten some very favorable decisions from some of the federal district courts down here, from very conservative judges who say, you know, the law is the law. If you're entitled to the exemption, fine, you're entitled to it, but you're not entitled to exemptions that you're not entitled to. So those are the kinds of cases that we work on. The Georgia coast, as you know, is a very special place. We consider the coastal area to consist of 11 counties, the 6 actually on the coast, and then the next tier of counties inland that are still have marshes, coastal and tidal rivers, creeks, and coastal ecology. Georgia has approximately 1/3 of the salt marsh, approximately 378,000 acres, and the largest amount of freshwater wetlands in the United States. We have 100 miles of beaches. We have 14 barrier islands, 1,655 marsh hammocks, the greatest species diversity anywhere in Georgia. We have an economy that thrives on tourism. The unique resource, Georgia is unique among the states on the southeast Atlantic seaboard in that the coast remains relatively undeveloped. The resources on the coast, the freshwater wetlands, provide very valuable environmental functions. They act as a buffer, improving the water quality by filtering and removing pollutants from stormwater. They help maintain water levels and prevent floods. They provide habitat for fish and wildlife. Georgia's marshes are, of course, famous the world over, and the marsh hammocks, 1,655 of them, are unique to Georgia. Georgia has a unique estuarian system. 70% of Georgia's commercially and recreationally important fish, crustaceans, and shellfish spend at least part of their time in the estuaries that are protected by the marsh and the marsh hammocks. Manatees live in Georgia, only in Georgia and Florida. They depend on this system for their life. Georgia, of course, has beautiful beaches. The beaches not only are for recreation and provide beauty, but they shelter the marshes, the hammocks, and the inland developed areas from storms. They provide the nesting grounds for sea turtles, bird species, and smaller wildlife. They provide an important stop for migratory birds en route to their distant breeding grounds. As we mentioned, Georgia has more species the Georgia coast has more species diversity than any other place in the state. We have a number of endangered species on the coast, including sea turtles, right whales, manatees, and wood stork. The Southern Environmental Law Center has always worked on the Georgia coast and on other cases and on the other coastal areas along the East Coast. But several years ago, we came to the realization that the Georgia coast is truly unique in that while it has all these special resources, it remains relatively undeveloped, but it also faces enormous threats over the next 10, 20, or 30 years. We decided that the Georgia coast was sufficiently special that it deserved a special effort at protection. So we undertook a study of the coast. We interviewed over 70 scientists, state and local officials, business leaders, developers, others. We did extensive research into the resources and the threats on the coast, and we produced a paper about 1.5 years ago, not a paper, but a report titled At the Tipping Point, a comprehensive assessment and conservation action plan for the Georgia coast. And we use this report as a guide to our work on the coast. What we learned is that, and some of this you will know, but it's striking when you put it together in reference to the situation here on the coast. Georgia was the fastest growing state in the country between July 2005-2006. And while the economic downturn has slowed growth in Georgia and elsewhere, it remains one of the fastest growing states in the nation. A 2006 Georgia Tech study of 10 coastal counties found that population growth in the coastal counties increased by 62% between 1970 and 2000 and will grow another 51% by the year 2030. If you look at these population housing density charts from 1950 and then you look at the projected housing density chart for 1930, you can see how there's substantially more dark area in the 2030 projection. We're going to have a lot more people down here and a lot more demand on our resources. Now, our group is not an anti-development group. We understand that individuals have a right to gain value from their property, that we need development, that we need jobs, that we need economic growth. We're all in favor of all of that. We do view our job, however, as protecting the public's interest in the public's resources as we have development and economic growth. Now, the situation can vary depending on exactly where you are on the coast and exactly how title passed from the days of England to the present days. But most of the marsh in Georgia is owned by the public. Most is not privately owned. So when you see a 1,000-foot dock, when you see a bridge to a barrier island, when you see a marina, when you see a boathouse, bear in mind that's probably constructed in the public's property. And in order to construct structures in the public's property, there must be a finding by the permitting authorities that it is in the public interest to do so. Now, if I lived down here on the coast, I would want a house with a dock on the water. Don't misunderstand me at all. I'm just asking you to realize that when you see these structures built in the marsh, even though they may increase the tax base, even though they may create jobs and promote economic development, it's the public's property that we're talking about. One of the threats that the potential damage that results from the increased development threat that we see on the coast are of course the loss of wetlands. Here is an example of somebody dredging a wetland without the proper permitting to do so.